Liar. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, November 30th, 2023. But not for Henry Kissinger, I guess. I guess it's still the date for him. But he's not alive to see it. That's the big news of the day. Everyone knows it already. I don't have that much, actually, to say or complain about with Kissinger. I think everybody kind of knows the record. Not someone I've spent a long time waiting to see them die. Unlike, say, Donald Trump. That'll be really something for me. Maybe it's a generational thing. Maybe Greg has more about it. Maybe he's just as happy to see him gone and just be done with it. I don't know. I'll have to check the lineup of stories that's available in the famous raft coming downriver just now. Plenty of other things to talk about and plenty of terrible people still around that we can develop the record on today. So that's always good news. It keeps the show going anyway, even if these are terrible people who populate our newsfeed with awful news. However, there are other things going on. Let's see. We have a number of things to catch up on. A lot of new articles telling you just how bad things are. And the continuing trend among the media, which is a good thing of them. I know it's frustrating they didn't wake up to this earlier, but sort of, I don't know. I don't know whether they're making up for lost time. Nothing can make up for the lost 4 years that we spent under Trump, not the least of which was the death toll of the COVID-19 pandemic, which was largely his fault. But it's good to see the media largely aware of the fact that he's threatening, fascist dictatorship should he come to power again, whether through elected, by means of election or any other means. And I don't know whether they've figured out what they will do about anything if it happens, but it's good to see that they're at least aware of it, even if I know it's driving Marcy Wheeler up the wall to watch people say, hey, this guy might be sort of a fascist absolutist. And we got to watch out for it. It's a new trend. Look what he's saying that's so new about this now. Well, of course, all indications were there right from the very beginning. That's what made him attractive to his supporters. And, hey, it's a real problem. All right. Well, let's see. Other things to catch up on. Justice is all about Kissinger today. I'll tell you all about that. Also, I guess, as celebrity deaths do, they come in... It's said that they come in threes, which is a warning. You all need to be aware of that. Who's the most famous person you've been waiting for to die? Because there's a second death of note today. Shane McGowan, who's I'm not that familiar, but apparently widely renowned as a member of the Pogues, a band I've certainly heard of, if not a lot from, because I just wasn't... paying attention at the correct moment, but a much beloved figure as opposed to Kissinger. So, it makes for an interesting pairing. Anyway, I'm mostly concerned about the death of the various, and at least I'm thinking of at least one very famous Kissinger death meme that I guess we won't see anymore. That funny one with the Reaper at the video game parlor claw prize machine, wondering, when someone else would die, hey, is Kissinger even in this thing? And of course he always was, and I guess now he's been retrieved. I actually did see somebody right out of the gate with a touching tribute to that famous Kissinger death meme, the death of the Kissinger death meme, and his arriving at the gates of heaven and being, was I a good meme? You were the best. And I guess that's the end of it for that one. So, all right, well, end of an era, truly. Oh, and also there was a human being behind that. And also there's reactionary stuff out there as well. along the lines of, hey, as much as you may have disliked him, if that's even the word for it, why, how dare you, or too soon, or don't speak ill of the dead, but there are a lot of dead people who have been waiting for their chance to speak ill of the guy who killed him, and I have to get out of their way for today, or it's just bad juju, I think, from here on in. All right, Greg Dworkin is here, and we're glad of that, and we hope it continues for a long time. Good morning, Greg. How are you? How
Good
are you
morning.
feeling
So when Henry Kissinger died, at least when I got the news,
yes,
I tweeted, I can't say anything good about him, so I'm not going to say anything at all. But I didn't have to because like everybody else had something to say.
Right. That's the best use of social media. Well, everyone else is doing all that dirty work.
But you mentioned two things that I think are worthy of pointing out.
Well, at least there's two.
You said too soon. Well, in 2019, a
He's
book
100,
was
by the way. It's
published
not too soon, but okay.
called Only the Good Die Young, The Verdict Against Henry Kissinger. And in the blurb that they were using to sell the book, they said, too soon? Not soon enough. That's one.
Well, yeah, okay.
The other was don't speak ill of the dead and all that. Now, that's a Latin saying, goes back centuries, but
that's where Latin came from.
The quip on that, I learned, was actually from Jackie Moms Mabley, who should get credit for it.
Okay.
And she was a child bride forced into a marriage she didn't especially appreciate, had no love for her husband. And after he died, she said, my mom always told me, say only good things about somebody who died. So he's dead. Good. And she's the one who originated that. It's been attributed to Betty Davis about Joan Crawford, which is probably not true. That probably came from a drag show that somebody did who put those words in her mouth about Joan Crawford, and that became the meme that she probably never said. And other people have been attributed, but actually Moms Mobley in 1971 was the first one who actually said it. So good for her.
Yeah, I think she was the subject of a famous copyright case at some point in my legal school career. That So maybe that was it.
Case of copyright versus trademark.
Yeah.
So.
Well, all right. So a little bit of history lesson there as well.
Well, a little more history lesson here because we're talking about Henry the K.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
How did we get here again?
The first thing I saw was this Rolling Stone headline and subheader.
Yes, they were very quick out of
the gate. They were
right
out of the gate with it, and my jaw dropped because,
clunk.
As Maggie Court says, Kissinger obit headlines could be used to teach a journalism school masterclass in how appealing to neutrality sometimes results in the worst kind of bias.
Okay.
Right?
Mm-hmm. Here I see this headline.
She uses the New York Times, but everybody uses the New York Times for this. Henry Kissinger dies, says the New York Times.
Well, he did.
Which is true, right?
Right. They got
Diplomat who long
Nailed
held
it.
the global stage was both celebrated and reviled.
Okay. I mean, that's neutral truth, certainly.
About that. Henry Kissinger is dead at 100. Another New York Times story says, shaped nation's Cold War history. The most powerful Secretary of State of the post-war era, he was both celebrated and reviled. His complicated legacy still resonates. Fine. Okay. But,
I think.
Okay. Ron Campais is a reporter.
Yes.
He's a Washington bureau chief for JTA, which I forget.
Jewish Telegraphic Agency.
Yeah. I knew it was Jewish something.
Joint Trotultion Laboratories.
But he says, here's my Kissinger story, which is really quite interesting.
Jet. Yes. All right. Everyone has a good one.
You may remember Kissinger from Laos and Cambodia and bombing the crap out of them. And, a vignette about that was from, of all people, the chef, Anthony Bourdain, in his book.
Oh, yes. Everyone was sharing that.
Cooks, he said, once you've been to Cambodia, you'll never stop wanting to beat Henry Kissinger to death with your bare hands. You'll never be able to open a newspaper and read about that treacherous, prevaricating, murderous scumbag sitting down for a nice chat with Charlie Rose or attending some black tie affair for a new glossy magazine without choking. You have to witness what Henry did in Cambodia, the fruits of his genius for statesmanship, and you'll never understand why he's not sitting in the dock at The Hague next to Milosevic. So he wasn't too fond of him after having visited Cambodia. And of course, we know about Chile.
Yes.
But did you know about Uruguay?
Very few people know about it at all.
Ron Campea said, I was working at the AP at the time. And every 6 months, the D.C. AP office would send reporters to the National Archives in College Park to search through a room full of newly declassified documents to see if anything 30 years old was newsworthy. I guess there's a sunsetting thing. After 30 years old, stuff gets released on a periodic basis.
I could see that. All right.
So I made one such trek in 2002, he says.
Okay. So that's 20 years ago. So almost 10 more years until we get the news about that.
You literally had to randomly search through boxes and hope something would pop out. And I found transcripts of meeting Nixon and Kissinger had with foreign leaders. Notes that Kissinger or others in the meetings would take. And what struck me was how much up close they were bullies. They made clear to their supposed peers they're the big cheese and they'd better get out of the way. So I wrote the story that way. And buried deep inside was this one sentence.
I'm anticipating it eagerly.
In his meeting with Heath, I guess that's Edward Heath, the UK.
Oh, okay.
Nixon boasts that U.S. ally Brazil rigged the election in Uruguay. The next morning, I got a frantic call from George Washington University's National Security Archive. Could I please share that document about Uruguay? I said, yeah. Why? And the caller said, your byline is on the front pages across South America this morning.
Yeah.
I thought, surely this must be known that the U.S. rigged the election in Uruguay in the early 70s. People suspected, but there was never a smoking gun until it popped out on a decades-old typewritten sheet at the National Archive. And then he has the actual story back then.
I mean, except for Uruguay.
So, basically Kissinger was amoral.
Yes.
Realpolitik, whatever. There's other lines about him really not caring whatsoever, he said to Nixon, about in the 70s, Jews getting out of Russia, Soviet Union at the time. I don't care if they burn. I suppose it's a humanitarian thing, but, whatever. It's not America's interest.
Oh.
So it's not a good person. So you have the New York Times talking about the fact that he was controversial.
Yeah.
Right. And then you have Rolling Stone, which just went there.
Okay.
Ackerman has this headline, which is not what you'd see in the New York Times. Henry Kissinger, war criminal, beloved by America's ruling class, finally dies.
Oh. Yeah,
the infamy of Nixon's foreign policy architect sits eternally beside that of history's worst mass murderers. A deeper shame attaches to the country that celebrates him. So there you go.
Oh. Well, that seems to sum it up, at least what I saw last night.
Yeah, it's under the vertical. Sometimes they give them these titles for this one thing.
Yeah. And
the title for this one thing is called Good Riddance.
Okay.
So just to give you a flavor.
That is a flavor. And, what an interesting one. I love the story about the trips to the National Archives. I think I would like to do those trips. But, yeah, that's interesting. So, how come you want this paper? This is Uruguay calling. I would like to have that paper, please. Oh, yeah. Interesting, too. And I wonder if that news will make it to Donald Trump's desk. And, of course, he'll use that to prove everything that he has to say about American elections.
Well, the flip side of the coin is he had a business, Kissinger Associates, and he basically offered his expertise to anybody and everybody who wanted. And right up until he died, people were just, paying to go to the office to get his wisdom. And you find most of the secretaries of state, Democratic or Republican, Hillary Clinton or otherwise, saying, he knew his stuff and you got to give him his due.
He knew things. He did the things. That's how he knew them.
Well, he did the thing, yeah. The amorality part of it is just, it's one of those things for 24 hours you don't talk about except if you're Rolling Stone.
Or most
or
other
like
people.
90% of the Americans who were talking about this morning.
Yeah, no one can hold back on that one. I sometimes think that idea of having the office and the consulting, I think that's what Rudy Giuliani envisioned for himself. Mm-hmm. That he was just going to be this elder statesman, even though he had never actually been a statesman. But, whatever. But
I may not be a statesman, but I'll get halfway there, because if I wait long enough, I will certainly be elder.
There's no doubt about that. But, I guess you have to acknowledge like that. He knew his stuff. Like, he knew how to be terrible and amoral and
Yeah, he knew what
advance
would
what
work.
he thought was America's interest, but really, maybe not, or maybe just his interest or whatever, but it didn't matter because it was amoral and disgusting. But certainly if you wanted to unearth, interesting stories about how the rest of the planet was screwed up by his scheming, he's the source for it. He did know that stuff. I wouldn't pay, but I don't know. Some of those stories, I think you don't want to pay him for it, but boy, do you want to get those stories out, like fixing elections in whole other countries.
Well, I think we'll learn a lot more as time goes by.
I guess so. Goodness. Well, all right. The second Kissinger decade is upon us.
Well, I'm just saying.
Century, sorry.
Century, you mean? But
no, I mean.
I'm with Anthony Bourdain.
Yeah, I guess so.
I am on most things.
You shouldn't have to go to Cambodia to find that out, but that's why we sent him, and he came back and told us. And now we don't even have to go,
right,
to want to do that.
So I'm not sure what happened. I have to find out. But apparently there was going to be an 8 a.m. outdoor news conference by George Santos.
What happened is it's cold, and he's lazy.
Because, as you know, the House starts with a pledge and benediction,
right,
and reading of last session's minutes and our acceptance of them, and then a George Santos motion to expel him. But that didn't happen. Won't happen today because that motion has already been made. And interestingly, although it's a privileged motion, it's supposed to be voted on within 48 hours.
Yeah.
Mike Johnson said, well, instead of Thursday, it was introduced Tuesday. But instead of voting Thursday, we'll do it Friday.
Oh, okay.
And the reason we're going to do it Friday is we want to give him a chance to resign, and hence the 8 a.m. News conference where George Santos was reportedly saying, I refuse to resign.
Maybe he'll die. They thought that, too. I mean, it's low percentage, but if we wait another day, he could die.
Well, no, what he's going to say is now that
did.
Henry Kissinger is dead, I don't have to resign.
Sure.
Well, what's one thing got to do with that? Well, what's what anything I do have to do with anything else? I do what I want, and you have to write it up because I'm the guy making news, and you have to write what I say.
Obvious answer here is fake your own death. This is one of those moments that was cut out for.
Uh-huh. So, indicted Republican George Santos to face U.S. House expulsion vote Friday, says Reuters.
Yes.
And although the outcome isn't yet known, a lot of people have defected from the okay, he can stay to okay, he can go. So it's likely he'll be expelled. Mike Johnson has second thoughts about it because he'll lose a vote.
Meh.
But, exactly. Who cares what Mike Johnson thinks?
And once you've been out to the outdoor press conference area at 8 a.m. and he doesn't show up, you'll want to beat George Santos to death with your bare hands because it's cold out there.
So the CBS News story is
Mission
Representative
accomplished.
George Santos remains defiant as House to vote on expulsion this week. So they don't really know when the vote's going to be. They're trying to give Santos enough time to resign, and he won't. Just like they're trying to give Tommy Tuberville enough time to get off this thing about blocking military appointments, and he won't.
I thought he said the other day, I think his time has come, but I guess...
Yeah, he did, but is he doing anything about it?
Well, he may not know what to do.
He doesn't know what to do.
There may not be anything to do,
what he said
actually.
To the members of his party, look, I know I got you into this mess, and don't worry, I'll get you out. And they assumed that meant that he would withdraw his
that
blockage
was the assumption? No.
Just in time for the vote in the Senate to change the rules happens so that they don't have to change the rules, and then he'll take credit for saving the Senate.
All right.
That's okay.
Kirsten Sinema already saved
it. Nobody's going to believe that, so if he wants to do that, fine. Who cares?
I guess so.
As long as he stops blocking stuff.
Yeah, and there may not be anything to do to end the blockade. You just say, all right, well, it's about time to end the blockade. And then what it takes is somebody saying, is there a blockade here? Can I go through and try to go through and see if he objects? And if not,
somebody objects.
Yeah, then all right. Well, then I guess then it means something. They don't. He doesn't send you something in the mail saying, I hereby lift my blockade.
Right. Exactly.
So, all right. George Santos.
Did you talk about this yesterday? I know you talked about various and sundry stuff about books.
I don't know.
I mentioned Romney's book. Did you mention Liz Cheney's book?
No. Did somebody find something funny in it? Because that's how I'll mention it, if that happens.
Well, in her new book, Liz Cheney paints a scathing portrait of the Republican Party, condemning ex-colleagues as enablers and collaborators who were willing to violate their oath to the Constitution out of political expediency and loyalty to Donald Trump.
That's funny.
She's the one that had the anecdote about Kevin McCarthy rushing down to Mar-a-Lago because Trump was so depressed he wasn't eating. And Kevin McCarthy was worried about him.
I never believed that rumor. Yeah. Oh, you have to go. He's so depressed he's not eating. Give me a better rumor. Not eating.
Now, she says in her book, Trump's the most dangerous man ever to inhabit the Oval Office, which is true. And she says House Speaker Mike Johnson appeared especially susceptible to flattery from Trump and aspired to being anywhere in Trump's orbit.
Oh,
now,
weird.
The reason that I think this is especially interesting is because a lot of times you criticize people, especially in the Trump administration, for like, why didn't you say that in real time? But she did.
That's true. She wasn't in the Trump administration, but she was there. That's the point.
She said it all the time. She said it real time. She agreed to be on the impeachment committee. She voted to impeach him. She did all those things that are in her book.
Yes.
So no criticism allowed that, well, you should have done that when. No, she did. She did what she could.
Yeah, all right. You can do the criticism. You'll be wrong.
About other things,
But that's okay.
She didn't have a great voting record as far as I'm concerned, but that's different than this.
Yes, right. I don't vote with her. I just agree with what she said about Donald Trump.
Mm-hmm.
That's okay. Yeah. We're in for that. That is a good story. And Kevin McCarthy was supposed to be the pick-me-up?
Yeah.
Liz Cheney had known George Santos existed.
This is Kyle Griffin writing. Liz Cheney confronted Kevin McCarthy about his post-January 6th Trump embrace. They're really worried, McCarthy said. He's not eating, so they asked me to come see him. What? You went to Mar-a-Lago because Trump's not eating, Cheney said? And McCarthy said, yeah, he's really depressed.
Wow. Well, I guess he cares less about lunch than these people, Kevin, or something.
Well, no. What it means is Kevin McCarthy is a liar. Is what it means.
Oh, all right. Yeah. That does seem unlikely. I mean, right. I guess, yes, the person who said Donald Trump's not eating is probably a big liar.
Right, exactly.
Okay.
We discussed his inability to eat over hamburgers.
I get you. Yeah.
At Mar-a-Lago.
Right.
Where he had 9 and then threw ketchup against the wall. And then he poured ketchup on me because he was really upset. And I let him because I'm Kevin McCarthy and he can do whatever he wants.
Yeah, this is great ketchup, sir. Okay. Well, that's a story. We'll take it. So she's a book out now. Didn't she?
Yeah.
Has she not already done this? Is this the third book? Is this another book? Is this the first one?
I don't keep track.
Yeah.
I don't know that she wrote one, but
I feel like she would have gone immediately to work on that. Or she's certainly spoken volumes, and that's good. I wonder what imagine what she was holding back, if anything. I guess we'll take a look and find out, or some intrepid reporter will read it and tell us that's not happening. I'm not buying any books.
Now, Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson aren't the only bad people in the Republican Party, by the way.
No.
This is funny. Jared Moskowitz, who's a Democratic member of Congress and happens to be on James Comer's committee. And they frequently clash because Comer's an idiot.
Yes.
And I think this is the one where Comer called Moskowitz a Smurf.
Oh.
Because he was dressed in blue or something along those lines.
Huh.
Can't quite remember.
All right.
But,
rings a bell. But I
as you may know, Hunter Biden has agreed to give testimony to Congress as long as it's public.
Right.
James Comer refused. We want him here. We're going to subpoena him. We want him here. Okay, well, come as long as you make it public. You can't make this public.
Yeah, because then people will find out we have nothing.
Asin tweets the commentary here that Comer made on Newsmax, where he says Comer pretty much giving away the game here, admitting he doesn't want to do a public hearing with Hunter Biden because Jamie Raskin, Dan Goldman, and little Moskowitz jumping up and down. That's how he said it.
I see.
They'll make a scene, like Jim Jordan jumping on the table without a coat, No. And we can't have that because decorum, house, all this stuff.
Right.
So Jared Moskowitz retweeted that with the following comment. Have you been injured in committee? Have you been caught lying and found it hard to function? Are you hearing voices in your head? Call the law firm of Raskin, Goldman, and Moskowitz. We deliver.
All right.
It's really quite amusing.
Yeah, that's high quality.
Yep.
Good job. All right. Funny. All right. That's a good one. All right. I'll take note of that. Is he?
So between Henry
media?
Kissinger at that end of the Republican spectrum and James Comer at this end of the Republican spectrum, with Kevin McCarthy and Mike Johnson in the mix, what a sad state.
Yes. Well, I'm not sad for them, but they are a sad bunch of people. That's certainly
There was
true.
once a party that ruled the world, and now there's a party that can't even get their act together.
Yeah. They
That
want a
passed the
civil
simplest rule to get legislation on the floor.
That's right. They emerged from nothing to take America in. Well, I guess they launched America into that Civil War. That kind of sucked. But they won the Civil War. They defeated slavery, and then there was some time where they were bankers and people were earning good salaries and had cars, and there was a chicken in every pot. And then, even though that was the other party's idea, but that's common with the Republicans as well. And then all of a sudden, crazy. Can't do a goddamn thing. That's very weird.
It's weird. When you and I retire, people will turn to each other and say, I don't remember much about Kagro in the morning, but I do remember you have to pass a rule before you can get legislation on the floor to have a vote.
Yeah, I hope that would be the case. And then, there'll be young kids who in their twilight years themselves will say, yeah, I do remember that much. Like I can sing the preamble for the Constitution.
Right.
For us
and I know
Xers.
when rule has to be capitalized.
Right. And when it is not. All right. So we'll wait. We'll come back in a bit. You feeling all right today? You want to do another? You don't have to. But, all right.
I'm going to say, won't last till 10 o'clock, but I got a few things to say after.
Sure. Okay. So you can make it a casual second segment and do what you want. It's
20.
like you are retired if you want.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. We'll be right back then. George Santos, probably not.
Hi, I'm Scott Anderson, the guy that writes the daily summary for this show, Kagro in the Morning. Thank you to everyone that supports this show. Many of you send donations through PayPal, Patreon, Square Cash, Radio Public, and so on. Some of you write your own essays and send them in, or read articles with your own commentary. We appreciate it. Now, some of you are listening to this and thinking, I'd like to help, but isn't there something I could do that wouldn't require money or effort? Why, yes, there is. You can just like us. On Daily Kos, they call it the recommend button. YouTube has a thumbs up. There are hearts and likes and love buttons. Tap our love button. Tap our love button every day. Share our shows and summaries on Facebook and Twitter, YouTube and iTunes, Stitcher and Amazon. Most of these places allow you to write a review, so a sentence or two would be great. Recommend us to social media, or tell your friends to listen to the show. You aren't just helping us, you're helping them find their new favorite thing to listen to. You could change the world. So thank you in advance from me and everybody else in the world.
There we go. Hey, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show as we converse in the background here. I got the rule book out. I'm going to take a look around while we discuss some other things to see. But if you're wondering why it is that they're not voting on the George Santos expulsion thing, despite the fact that it's clearly a privileged resolution, I think the rules on moving a privileged resolution give you a hard time limit on when you have to get your debate on the issue, but not necessarily setting the time frame for the vote itself. Or I'll have to look it up and refresh my memory. It may be that there's also a time limit on the vote, but it usually just comes in tandem. They just tear the Band-Aid off all at once. If we're going to have the annoyance of this debate take place, we might as well dispose of the whole thing and have a vote and get it done with. But in this case, I guess they decided to wait until Friday so that it would be a news dump thing, or they could take care of some other business, etc. But I'll be looking that up while we discuss some other items on your agenda, Greg.
Well, one of the other items I wanted to talk about was what's going on in Israel this morning. First of all, our friend Noga Tarnopolsky reports that after an unplanned judicial recess caused by the war, hearings in the Prime Minister's corruption trial will resume next week.
Okay, it's about time.
Well, that's good in the sense that, he needs to be on trial for his corruption.
Yeah, it's not
And
usually
that's
something you want to
bad
do in the
in
middle
terms
of a war.
of pushing him to do something terrible to stay in power.
Yes, I guess
So
so.
it's important, and therefore you should take note, and we'll see what happens from it.
Yeah, I mean, it's an opportunity there to conduct affairs reasonably while he's on trial and showing the country we can do this. We actually don't need him at all.
Right.
And maybe we
Eli
should get rid of him.
Coas, a Middle East analyst, reported this morning, sources are saying that 8 women and children, along with 3 bodies held hostage, will be released later today by Hamas.
Okay. Now we start to find out that some of the people who were held hostage have been dead for
A while,
considerable
and that's
period
one of the
here.
reasons why they're not all released at once, et cetera, et cetera. But
Yeah.
a couple of things of note here. First of all, the overall fact that it's happening at all. The pause was supposed to be over a couple of days ago, and Biden pressure is working so far. And yes, a tremendous number of other people besides Biden are doing the hard work, including the Qataris, the Egyptians, Jordanians,
Yes.
to mention a few.
And the general public around the world.
Yeah. And there's a story on that, since you brought it up. No conditions on future Israel aid, despite Biden's worthwhile thought quip from Politico. The White House stance could put the president on a collision course with members of his own party.
Sure. Well, that's Monday
Because
through
according
Friday
to Politico,
thing.
everything Biden does is pressure on all sides, and this may not work because that's just what they do. The fact that we had wonderful economic news, well, forget about that. You can't talk about that. You have to have a but.
Yeah, it's the new good
Economic
news for John
news
McCain.
is that GDP was revised upward for a really robust number for the last quarter.
One of the more gross domestic products we've had.
Right, but there's no but there. I mean, it's just good news.
Yeah, for John McCain.
Yeah. So, obviously Biden is wrestling with an incredibly fraught,
Careful.
difficult situation trying to get peace in the Middle East. Anybody who's ever worked in that area or even read about it knows it's just not easy. So the fact he hasn't been able to pull it off yet is reason to say, well, he has these headwinds. Well, he's got this, he's got that. He can't do this, he won't do that. This is going to be – we know.
Yes.
It's hard. I get it. And you don't have to start every story with, well, this is going to put, walking the UAW picket line is going to put Biden at risk. Walking down the hall is going to put Biden at risk. Stop it, Betty. We get
Well,
it.
I
You
guess
can't
so,
just
yes.
unequivocally say, this is amazing that he's been able to get this far.
Sometimes I
in a
wonder
morass.
whether this is just like reaction to since they're only just now learning that, say, Trump is an autocrat or a wannabe autocrat. Are they just now realizing, the presidency is difficult and hard to do and actually fraught with peril? We didn't realize that during the 4-year clown show because we just weren't, that we didn't have time for that. We were just talking about how outrageous everything is. But I don't know. They should be acclimated by now. It's 3 years in.
Right. One of the other interesting things about the hostage list is that 2 of the hostages that are going to be released are Bedouin Israelis.
Yes. They have a wide variety of hostages.
They do. And so, that
Everybody
has
who
to
was
be
around,
highlighted.
it wouldn't matter.
Not
to
just
them.
Americans, because there are very few of those.
Yes.
Not just, Israeli Ashkenazi Jews. There's some of those.
Yes.
But there's a wide variety of people from other countries and within Israel, Israeli Arabs. So,
Yes.
how does that happen? Well, because Hamas is like
Fog of
Hamas.
war. Yeah, I mean, look, they just grabbed everybody that they could, and it's we'll sort them out later. Grab them, and if they're tie, we'll release them first. I don't think they had any plan for it, but yeah, that's what they did, and that was a terrible situation. I just can't imagine. And I read a little bit about the Bedouin community, basically who's our voice in this, by the way? Hamas doesn't speak for us. Palestinians don't even really speak for us in general. And no one does. Certainly not the Israelis, although we're Israeli citizens. Guess what? We're last on their list of priorities somehow. Yeah, they got the short end of the stick on that one, but they have historically for a long time.
Right. Anyway, this is from the Politico article, and it's one of those things where you scratch your head and say, look, but Biden's continued strong support for Israel's offensive has incensed his left flank, leaving him vulnerable in a tight race against Donald Trump, his expected 2024 Republican rival. Some Democrats in swing states like Michigan, you can always find a Democrat to say anything, say they won't pull the lever for the president's reelection because he lost their vote for supporting Israel's retaliation for Hamas's October 7th attack, during which time the militants killed 1,200 people in Israel and took around 240 hostages. Good reminder that that actually happened. We don't know how this is going to play out. The left flank of the Democratic Party often is actually not part of the Democratic Party.
That sometimes
forget to mention that. And so progressives can be progressives, far left can be far left, Bernie bros can be Bernie bros, whatever you want. It doesn't necessarily mean these are actual Democrats, and it doesn't mean that they're anything other than influencers trying to get attention. And it doesn't necessarily mean that this is actually how people are going to vote for a year from now. But
that's the big point.
It's something you have to highlight because controversy.
Yeah, well, if it's
Democrats
happening,
in disarray.
it's highlighting. Yeah, but a year out and
every day,
things come into sharper focus
every day.
That's true, and it's we would hope that would not be the case because while it is a long time, a year from now, the election, and things change. Well, the more you harp on that, the less likely it is to change, I guess. But
well, on the other hand,
some people are doing that on
and
purpose.
Some mainstream Democrats note there's already arms transfer regulations requiring the U.S. to curb weapons sales to countries that violate human rights. In other words, Biden already does this.
Well,
it's like taking credit for the pause because you protested, as if Biden wasn't trying to do this from day one.
No, but you do deserve some credit in the make me do it arena. Okay,
yeah,
well,
I'm okay
if
with
there's
that.
no pressure,
I'm also okay with not being Henry Kissinger. I'm fine with all of that.
Well, good news.
Just be realistic. Well, that means I won't vote for Democrat. Why?
Yeah.
What's one thing got to do with another thing?
I don't know. But I sometimes think that that's part of the process for them, too. Like, okay, a year out in the abstract,
check who he's running against,
you say this. And then, it's frustrating. And like you say, you should not need any lessons in what happens if the other guy wins. But, some of these people I think are sort of luxuriating, and I can make a stink and have people focus on me for a year, and then we'll see what happens. I'll do the right thing. Maybe some of them won't. I don't know, but this is part of the thing. This is my job. I say I'm angry, and the only thing anybody cares about is whether I'm going to pull the lever. Well, then fine. I'll say I won't. All right. Well, that's annoying, and some people will take that seriously and believe you the first time and ignore you.
And some people will take it literally, and so
right.
We've learned over the years you have to take things both literally and seriously.
Yes. All right,
so if we take it literally, you're a problem, and if we take it seriously, you're a jerk.
Yeah, there's not a lot of good outcomes from it, but look, some people are performing. Some people are dead serious. It's hard to tell which one's which. I tend to ignore both for the time being.
Yeah, I totally accept the idea, if you just said it, that, look, it's really important we put pressure on the Biden administration to make sure they don't turn into Henry Kissinger.
That's would be
fine.
A smart
That's
way
good.
Of saying
I like
sure.
that.
Okay.
Just don't give me the stuff about, so that means I won't vote for him because Donald Trump will be elected, and so what? That'll teach him.
Well, right. No one wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear that.
I know.
And don't protest at Rosalind Carter's funeral, please.
Well, no. Don't. It was
don't
a
do
silly
it again.
idea. Yeah, well, that's the last time that's going to happen.
That's what I say.
Okay. However, if you wanted to protest at Henry Kissinger's funeral, I don't know if I could begrudge you that.
I have nothing to say about that.
Right. Do it smart, but that was the opportunity. They
just
grew
don't do it in a
impatient
way that
waiting
makes
for
them
Henry
sympathetic.
Kissinger.
That's all. My only request.
Yeah, right.
I'm going to protest Henry Kissinger.
I don't know how you would do that.
Don't do it to make him lovable.
I don't know
and
how
cuddly.
that would happen.
Just don't, okay?
Turn him into a Muppet. Well, good luck to everybody who has plans in protesting. I don't know. I was curious whether they think there's any value in protesting at that one, or is it just too obvious for them?
Right. Now, like an ocean liner, it takes a while to turn the economy around. And like the economy, it takes a while for perceptions of the economy to turn around. Obviously, we'll be following polls and other things, but This is from Axios yesterday. Just a reminder.
Okay.
The decline in the dollar is a reflection of growing certainty in financial markets that the Federal Reserve has basically vanquished inflation and will start to cut short-term rates in 2024. That's their item.
Okay, I got to ask an economist. What?
What?
I mean, yeah.
Yeah, but
I always find that
point
interesting.
Is, that's good news.
The decline of the dollar is good news. That's what they say.
The decline in rates is a good news.
Oh, okay. I thought that we started with that. Like, I always find that fascinating. The decline of the dollar, and here's why it's a good thing. Well, sometimes it is. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it has to do with international trade. Sometimes it has to do with rates.
If short-term rates come down,
that sounds good.
And that's up to the Federal Reserve, then that'll be good for consumers.
Yeah, right. I guess you borrow money, costs less. Although then I don't know, weirdo billionaires do things, buy things that they're not entitled to, and ruin them. There's some good and some bad.
Well,
but
you
hey.
know, since you mentioned that, you know, and since we're talking about Israel, I really didn't want to give it a lot of oxygen because I thought it was a story best ignored. Mm-hmm. But Elon Musk goes to Israel. Why does Elon Musk goes to Israel? Because Benjamin Netanyahu invites him. Why does Benjamin Netanyahu invite him? Because he collects autocrats and he likes to distract from whatever else is going on, including his upcoming trial next week.
Okay.
And in Israel, at least, it's universally panned.
Okay.
That was in my pundit roundup from yesterday. It was actually the lead story. So then Elon Musk goes on live interview with Andrew Ross Sorkin.
Back here in the United States?
I don't know where.
Okay.
This is
TV.
DealBook.
That's all.
DealBook TV.
Yeah.
And basically,
I assume that's here.
Has a breakdown.
Awesome.
And Andrew Ross Sorkin asks him about things like, well, what's going on with the advertisers? And Musk says, I have one thing to say about the advertisers like Disney and other people who won't advertise on X. Yeah. F you. F all of you.
I guess that's one thing. It's
and
two words.
Screaming at him.
And
it's like, there's something wrong with this guy.
Well, he has too much money and he doesn't care about things.
Right. I mean, but it was like really painful to watch.
He's kind of gross.
And you can't play the clip even if I send it to you because there's a lot of F words on it.
Right. F this. Is there anything? Does
F this, F that, F you, right. F all of you.
F
you know,
each individual advertiser. That's a good way to sell ads.
Yeah.
I don't know if you know that.
So there was another item that, people, I talked to a big wig tech guy and said, what's going on? I stay on Twitter. Why are you still on Twitter? Said the tech guy. And I said, whoever was writing this, I stay on Twitter because I'm hoping that Elon Musk will sell the company before he ruins it and breaks it. And the tech guy said, I know Elon Musk. He will break it before he sells it.
Wow. That could be. Okay. I mean, I guess I would hold on to Twitter shares if I thought he was going to sell it, but I don't know what. All right. But I guess you just sort of hope it'll be redeemed at one point. I don't know.
Yep.
Okay. Yep. I mean, maybe. You could go back after, I think. Who knows? But anyway, I don't know how long he can sustain the breaking, but I guess a long time if you have X billions of dollars. And
I'm going to send you the clip, not for you to play now, but for you to listen to later.
I did see a lot of people circulating clips and then lots of discussion, people saying, well, the clips are only part of it. You should watch the whole show. But there's no chance I'm going to do that. But they said the whole thing was a disaster from start to finish, which, again, another question for the media. Like, well, why? Why did you do that? Well, we just wanted to give them a forum to say something dumb and people to circulate clips about it.
Yeah, I just want you to know what I really think he said.
Fulfill that. Okay. Well, that's good. I'm glad we got into that. And, he's in some serious danger, I think. He's, people are also observing that he's, I'm not an armchair psychologist here, but people, observing he's exhibiting some really classic manic depressive
Yeah,
symptoms.
I mean, it's we're not going to make that diagnosis on TV. We're not Bill
I'll do
Frist.
it. We're not on TV. You can make the diagnosis. Go ahead.
It was pretty odd.
Yeah, so he's definitely, ping-ponging back and forth between weird highs and lows. He owns a lot and seems to enjoy showing off his guns. I'm a little worried that, there's going to be some gun waving in the near future, and somebody's going to get hurt. I don't know how badly, but I'm putting him down on a prospective gun fail list here. I think somebody ought to lock the stuff up in his house. I don't know if anybody has that authority in his household. Or alternatively, quit and don't do anything. Just don't go in the house, and what happens, happens. Stay away. I think his kids are elsewhere, so maybe it's all good. Domestic staff, if any, wear Kevlar, man. Quit if you can.
Anyway, that's it for me for now.
Okay. Yeah, I drove you out with that. That's enough for me. Thank you. Goodbye. I can appreciate that. Thanks, though, for stopping by. It's Thursday, so you have the weekend to
by
further
Monday,
your
I should be
recovery.
okay.
Excellent. We hope so.
Abby's much better, for those of you who
Good
are
news,
asking.
right?
Thank you very much.
Sticking to the non-poop diet. That you should have
I was up really early this morning just to make sure, but she actually was fine.
Right. Got to watch out for midnight snacking with these types.
Exactly right.
Okay, very good. I'm glad to hear she's on the mend. You sound fine to me. That's good news.
In between cough / mute button, which is just a wonderful invention.
Yeah, it's a pretty good one. They had the old time radio things had they had a separate button you could push from. My mute button is like loud. But anyway.
On the mic, the mute button clicks, and it's just really annoying. But using Skype mute button is quiet; it's silent.
That's good. Yeah, it won't work for me in this context, but that's good. It works nicely. You have that tool to work with.
Yeah, I mean, the tool because you're the one who told me to get this mic, and actually, it's been a great thing. The mic, the boom,
such a good mic that it picks up you pressing the mute button on it when I do hear it like this.
And for those of you who are wondering, people have identified the brand of my washing machine, and people have identified other things. And the weird music in the background for the first part of this segment was Diablo 4, in case any of you were wondering.
I think you've told us that before.
Yeah, I just think it's great background music.
Okay, it is.
Not
it's
everybody
very
agrees.
Nice. Right, YouTube might not. They might say, this is a copyright infringement, but I don't know if they'll hear it.
Right.
I just tipped them off.
Okay.
All right. Well,
anyway,
Thank you, Greg.
And
I'll
I'll
do
talk
the same.
to you on Monday.
Very good. We'll
or
see
Abby
you then.
One of us will.
Right. Somebody will come. It'll sound like barking, whatever happens.
Yeah.
Okay. Have a great weekend. Thank you for starting us off this way. And thank you for the boop sound, which we always love and enjoy. I like those little noises. Yeah, my microphone, I tried to demonstrate for you what the sound is, but you've heard it and probably subtly heard it and said, I think he just muted. And occasionally I do have to, if Greg is talking and I have to cough, sneeze, what have you, I'll usually hit the button. But and I tried to make the noise for you purposely and it didn't work. Let me try again. There you go. So that's when it makes noise, it's like that. Although it is occasionally cooperative if you press it in just such a way. I'll have to experiment. You can get things to mute quietly, which is the whole damn point. Anyway, let's see. So I promised that I would go digging in the rule book just to see if we could figure out what sort of latitude the speaker actually has in scheduling this Santos vote. And I'm not certain what section of the Jefferson's manual, the commentary on the rules, is going to lead us to the right part. But on questions of privilege, which is what we're talking about here, an expulsion resolution is a privileged matter. At least the version of the manual that I've got has that in section 713, if you need to check it out yourself. But this speaks to how quickly you are entitled to a time slot for a debate on a privileged motion, a privileged resolution, if you are offering it either as member of the House floor leadership from either party or as a backbencher. But the process goes a little something like this. We'll read about this. Whenever it is asserted on the floor that the privileges of the House are invaded, how do you like that language. The speaker entertains the question and may then refuse recognition if the resolution is not admissible as a question of privilege under the rule. So that's in the first instance. Like if you came and said, I bring a privileged resolution to the floor, and you're recognized to tell everybody what it is, and you say, well, I mean, this process actually takes place behind the scenes, but you bring a resolution and it's about something that isn't, or is the chair determines at the direction of the parliamentarian. Not, you can say, yeah, that's not actually entitled to the privilege. No, I'm sorry. That just gets regular consideration. It goes in the hopper. It's assigned without any proceedings on the floor, really, to a committee for consideration, and you go through the regular process. But anyway, let's see. So you can get refused recognition if the resolution is not admissible as a question of privilege under the rule. A proper question of privilege may be renewed, by the way. So you can bring it up over and over again if you lose the first couple times. Although the early custom was for the speaker to submit to the House the question whether a resolution involved the privileges of the House, the modern practice, you get that, is for the speaker to rule directly on the question. Okay. Subject to appeal where appropriate. So, yes, it is one person making the determination. No, it is not done without the opportunity for appeal to the full House. So, yes, the old practice was to submit it directly to the body and say, what do you think? Do you think it's a privileged question? And make everybody vote on it. Now, that prerogative still exists, but only as a backup to what the speaker says first. So anyway, under the form of the rule adopted in the 103rd Congress, the speaker may, in his discretion, recognize a member other than the majority or minority leader to proceed immediately on a resolution offered as a question of privileges, as a question of the privileges of the House, without first designating a subsequent time or place in the legislative schedule within 2 legislative days. And he is not required to announce the time designated to consider a resolution at the time the resolution is noticed, but may announce his designation at a later time. So how do you like that? That pretty much covers it right there. I know it's in gobbledygook language, but that wasn't too difficult to understand, I don't think. You basically, a privileged resolution gets a time for debate on the legislative schedule within 2 days. And I guess they've had that. Have they? I didn't follow it all that closely, but if they've had their debate on what to do with respect to the expulsion of George Santos, it doesn't necessarily mean they have to have the vote on it within 2 days, but you got to have the debate. There it is, right? You can, let's see, the speaker can recognize a member other than the majority or minority leader, and I guess that's what they did here, without designating a subsequent time or place. Oh, okay. But they did designate. Did they? I really should find out whether they had the debate or not. The speaker does not rule on the privileged status of a resolution at the time the resolution is noticed, but only when the resolution is called up within 2 legislative days. So there's a lot of places you can use to delay something like this. If a backbencher calls it up, you can have them bring it up and make an announcement and say that they have such a resolution at the desk. And then you can say, basically, I have 2 days to decide, 1, whether or not this is in fact a privileged resolution, and 2, if it is one, when will we debate it within 2 legislative days? I can schedule the time, though it doesn't necessarily say it has to be within the 2 days that you hold the debate, if you read this very closely. So there's a lot that goes into it, but they have some leeway. And I guess the other thing I wanted to warn about was there's the possibility, of course, none of these rules are self-executing. And so, although it says very clearly, well, hey, this has to happen within 2 days, what happens if you have a speaker who just says, to hell with it? I know it says I'm supposed to do it within 2 days, but I'm just not going to schedule it. What do? Well, the rules are on your side, and in a normal interpretation of them, you're going to be able to win, but somebody has to say something first. So if the speaker were simply to say, it says I'm supposed to do it within 2 days, but what if I do it within 3 days? What you're supposed to do, if you're the kind of person that wants, you're a stickler for the rules and it's important to you that it happen within 2 days and not 3, you could raise a point of order insisting, hey, the 2-day mark is coming up here and we really need to hold the speaker to the rule. And in all likelihood, even though nowadays Trump being Trump, Republicans being Republicans, all bets could be off, you never know. But presumably the House parliamentarian says, well, that's right. It does say you need to do it within 2 days. The second day is quickly coming to an end. This point of order is well taken, and I would recommend that the chair sustain this point of order, and we move immediately, if time is really running out, to having that consideration so that we do make it within the 2-day mark. But if no one says anything, it doesn't happen, right? If no one makes the objection, you roll into the 3rd day, and maybe no one does make the objection. And maybe this is a good reason then for, maybe this answers one of Greg's previous questions. Not the previous question, as we have sometimes discussed. That's the term of art. But a question asked by Greg previously, why multiple motions to expel George Santos? Everyone wants the same thing. Why not, for instance, offer either out of courtesy or political expediency, why not offer the opportunity to the Democrats to introduce that resolution, especially if you want to put the burden of making this decision on Democrats or blame them somehow for kicking a Republican member out. Well, one reason you might want to allow Republicans to make that, besides just grabbing the credit for it, is that if you recognize the Republicans' motion as the privileged motion that's pending, that gives you some latitude. What latitude? It gives the speaker, say, the latitude to, hey, how come our music isn't going? There we go. Must have hit a button there somewhere that made things pause. Anyway, but if you have a Republican motion that needs time on the floor and you intend to blow past the 2-day limit in one way or another, and you want to be able to get away with that without anybody raising a point of order, you recognize the Republican motion instead and just get the Republican proponent to agree not to make that point of order. How's that? All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Well, I'm not certain, because we were late with the music, how much of the explanation got on the air there. Plus, of course, we fade out as the music builds. So, I'll see if I can't make that point again. But one of the reasons why you might entertain more than one, or encourage there to be more than one privileged resolution for expulsion of George Santos in particular, in a situation like this, where Democrats are offering one and Republicans are offering one as well, and maybe even multiple Republicans. Well, what's the basis for, why would so many people offer one when the work is already done? That is about claiming credit for being the first mover or a mover to expel Santos and trying to get some credit for it at home. Now, why select one versus the other? On the one hand, yes, the speaker, the Republican speaker, the majority Republicans are going to want to pick a Republican originated resolution so that the credit goes to Republicans. We're policing our own. We recognize corruption when we see it. Ha, whatever. And we take real action to do something about it. Now, you may or may not believe that. It may or may not be true, but it's something that they might try to claim some credit for. On the other hand, I guess there's also, there was the idea that, well, maybe you do want to use a Democratic resolution in case you may want Santos gone, but you may also want to say, well, look at these bully Dems. They are throwing people out before there's a judicial determination of guilt, and we think that's a bad thing, or that's the excuse we want to use this time. And so we're going to do a tit-for-tat thing, and we're going to expel a Democrat later on, whatever it is. But, you weigh your options and decide which one you want, which one does the best job for you. But one of the reasons why you might select a Republican sponsored expulsion resolution is, as I was saying, if you are looking to stretch out the timeline and you recognize that the House rules give you 2 days to do this thing for which you really would rather have 3 days, and if you talk to the sponsors of the bill, you might be able to get away with running past the 2-day timeline and doing something on the third day if you can get agreement from the sponsors of the resolution not to raise a point of order against you for delaying. So that could be it. I mean, other people can raise the point of order. It's not a guarantee. So you don't tip your hand and let people know that you are going to do a 3-day thing unless you have widespread agreement to do something like that. And sometimes you can do that. You can talk to the minority leader and they may say, we don't particularly care if the expulsion vote is a Friday thing rather than a Thursday thing, just so long as it happens. Or, they might even say, we don't even really care if it happens. It's more trouble for you if it doesn't happen. So fine. So there are various ways to get to people an agreement whereby people may say, I'm not going to press the issue. So if you delay, then fine, I won't make a stink about it. I'm fine with it and go ahead. And that's enough. The rules have been broken, but if no one presses the issue and says the rules have been broken and I seek to enforce them as written, then the thing that everybody wants to happen just happens. You don't have to have a vote to waive the rules. You don't have to have any sort of unanimous consent request. Those are ways to lock it down in case somebody does object. But if nobody's gonna object, you just break the rules. Go ahead. Just sort of one of the fun dynamics of dealing with non-self-executing rules like that. All right. Greg has been, I guess, listening and feeding us. I hope that was enlightening. Maybe just a waste of time. But has been feeding us some more info about the situation since departing for the day. Let's see. What is this? Is a tweet probably from Jasmine Crockett, who says, and he's just pasted the text of these. There's probably several tweets here. Today is supposed to be expulsion day, but the vote is not scheduled as of yet. Okay. So it's looking like debate may take place today. We will see. But there is a twist. Okay, let's find out what the twist is. This morning, George Santos held that press conference. Well, I guess he actually held it. He showed up and basically said, I'm not trying to be kicked out alone. Jamal Bowman needs to go too. An eye for an eye or whatever logic he has. Jamal took a misdemeanor plea, and that's obviously worse than anything George has been accused of. So now instead of one expulsion, let's have 2. That's his idea anyway. All the while, again, we could be working on the president's package, which has aid for cities feeling crushed by the migrant crisis. Or hell, we could maybe pass a budget, but nope, we will have dueling expulsions. Really? Welcome to preschool. Our prestigious Congress. Darn autocorrect. Oh, George did say the Ferragamos he was wearing today are 6 years old and weren't purchased with campaign money. Kudos to the reporter that asked. Okay, sounds like a fun press conference. Now, let's see. Greg has also sent us this screen grab of, an email from Tom Emmer's office as Majority Whip. This will have the schedule in it, I guess. Good Thursday morning. The House will meet at 10 a.m. That's now. For morning hour and 12 p.m. for legislative business. Following 1-minute speeches, the House will begin consideration of H.R. 5961, the No Funds for Iranian Terrorism Act. That's a good act. Were we funding Iranian terrorism? Well, it's time to put a stop to that. I would have to agree. They may get my vote on that one, but I don't know what's actually in the bill. We'll have to read it. So, following debate, general debate, of course, House will debate amendments to H.R. 5961. Like, I have an amendment. What about just a little funding for Iranian terrorism? Or can I use gift cards to pay for Iranian terrorism? Is it terrorism if I send the Iranians a pizza while they're planning terrorism? We don't know. We have to have debate on those amendments. Next, though, the House will debate H.Res. 878, providing for the expulsion of Representative George Santos from the United States House of Representatives, because that's where he serves. The recorded vote on adoption of H.Res. 878 will be postponed until tomorrow. So debate today. I don't know if that's within 2 days since the notice of the resolution. I mean, that would be a Tuesday. I think that might be right. So again, 2 days to the debate. I don't even think they need to worry about the rules so far. I think they're still within the rules just to postpone the vote until tomorrow. Votes get postponed on things like this all the time. Not usually measures of expulsion, because you don't see those very often. But very often you'll have debate and you'll say, well, we'll just schedule the vote for tomorrow and we're going to vote on everything we debated this week all at once. Sometimes they do that. At approximately 3:45 p.m. today, we will vote on amendments to H.R. 5961. That's the No Funds for Iranian Terrorism. See, they delayed the votes on the amendments until after the expulsion thing. Sometimes it's a full day. Sometimes we'll vote on it tomorrow. Sometimes it's just later in the day. So you see, they're going to get together, debate the Iranian terrorism funding bill, then debate amendments, but not vote on any of it. Then they'll stop what they're doing, do the debate on expelling Santos, then stop again and have no votes on it. Then they'll go back to the Iranian terrorism funding thing and have the votes. And then tomorrow they'll come and vote on the expulsion thing that they debate today. Because that way no one can follow what's going on. And it chops it up into incomprehensible bits such that people will lose interest and walk away. And sometimes that's the thinking too, right? Well, we're stuck with having the debate today if we don't want to bend the rules, which we can, but we don't necessarily want to, and create a stink about this stuff. And people will tune in on, people have a limited C-SPAN patience, right? Oh, they're debating the thing. And they'll circulate it on social media and everyone will tune in and they'll watch the debate, and then anticlimactic moment, because they'll say, well, that's the end of that. We've debated it and we'll be voting on it probably tomorrow. Bye, everybody. And then they'll go back to boring amendments on the No Funds for Iranian Terrorism Act. And everyone will be left scratching their head and saying, I don't understand this stuff. Why do they do things this way? This doesn't make any sense. I hate Congress. And they may or may not remember to come back for the vote tomorrow. And even if they do, what do? They come back for the vote tomorrow and they play classical music and we watch the numbers on the screen. And most people hate that. They can't even sit through the 15 minutes that takes, because it takes half an hour instead of 15 minutes. All right. So what else is on the floor today, just in case you want to know? What are they going to waste their time with today while we're waiting for the big vote tomorrow? One, amendments on the Iranian terrorism thing. Then passage of the Iranian terrorism thing. One postponed amendment to H.R. 5283, and then the passage of H.R. 5283. We don't even know what the hell those are. And then a Democratic motion to refer HRES blank. This is super informative. A brand new resolution that we don't even have a number for yet. I wonder if that's a motion to expel Jamal Bowman, and they expect to have a Democratic motion to refer that resolution to committee rather than take it up as a immediate action item. I really don't know, though. And I can't find out either because it just says HRES blank. This is interesting. They don't usually, I've not seen whip notices include, I mean, they've sometimes have, well, this is when we anticipate the last vote, but this actually has a notation, walk off the floor 5 p.m., which I don't think is like a ceremonial thing. I think they're just saying this is the time that you can walk off the floor and not miss any votes. You might miss debate, but who cares about that? Then a note here, if the Democratic motion to refer fails, the House will debate HRES blank. Here's what the HRES blank is. Impeaching Alejandro Nicolas Mayorkas, Secretary of Homeland Security, for high crimes and misdemeanors. And they all have links to the things, except this is a screen grab, so I can't click on any of them. Any request for a recorded vote, of course, means the vote will be postponed until tomorrow. So, interesting. So that's how we expect the day to go down. I guess instead of a resolution, dueling resolutions, including one to expel Jamal Bowman, the eye for an eye will be one of the crazy ass motions to impeach Mayorkas, which I think has come up before. I don't know if this one is Murdery Trader Green's latest attempt at it or whether they're giving somebody else a time in the spotlight. we'll see if we can find out. There's more notes from Greg here as well. Let's see. It was a tweet, yes. And then another one that he includes. It has nothing to do with any of this, but from Joe Trippi, noting, this is the worst recession ever. Dow jumps more than 150 points, approaches new 2023 high after more cooling inflation data. I guess he was on CNBC to say that, or he was citing CNBC for it. It is the worst recession ever in terms of, this is not the deepest recession that's actually bad for people. It's just the worst recession at being a recession. The worst performing recession, that is to say, enough that you might wonder, what recession are you even talking about? All right. Well, I think that should wind it up more or less. I certainly don't need to read you more out of the rule book, although I don't feel like the question is answered yet. I still have more questions about how long do the rules allow the speaker to postpone the vote past the debate? Is there a linkage between the amount of time that's allowed to pass between the vote actually being held and the debate? And I'm not really sure, but that it seems like reading the rule book on the air is probably the least effective way of getting to that. More likely, you could probably find a good CRS report on it and find it while I'm reading you something completely different. All right, things that I put away for discussion for today. There are many. Let's see. What's a good one to bring you up to speed with? All right. How about this one? Because this is something they're supposed to be working on and aren't. Instead, they are dealing with maybe expelling or maybe failing to expel George Santos. We'll find out about that tomorrow. But first, Greg Sargent is noting what they're supposed to be working on and one of the many reasons why they're not working on it. Greg has found us the PDF of the CRS report. I guess one that we might be looking for. Privileged business on the House floor. There we are. From January of 2017 was the last time this was updated. How many pages are we talking about? Not that many. We can actually run through that. Do you want to do that before we go? Okay, it's very short. Greg is very invested in this. I like this. Continuing commentary behind the scenes. And he doesn't even have to hit the mute button. Abby can go crazy. It's actually Abby typing all of this stuff. All right. Well, all right. One more look at the privileged business, because that's what we do here. We bore you to death with the rules. That's what the show's about. All right. We'll read quickly through it because that's it's hard to skim a CRS report like this and not miss something. Privileged business. We all know exactly what it's about. It relates to the order of priority of business before the House and is defined in House rules and precedents as business that has precedence over the regular order of business. That's why we're not doing things like debating the Ukraine aid package, which was where we were going to go next. But this is the stuff that interrupts us, and this is why you can. As a consequence, it may supersede or interrupt other matters that might be called up or pending before the House. Members have a right to call up privileged business for consideration on the floor when the House is not engaged in considering some other matter. Privileged business consists of various kinds of bills, resolutions, and other matters. Clause 1 of House Rule 14 defines the daily order of business on the House floor. You have heard Greg mention the usual regular order of business in opening each session, daily session of the House, Pledge of Allegiance, all of that stuff, benediction, and then, of course, the resolution to expel George Santos. However, other House rules and precedents allow certain kinds of matters to interrupt this daily order of business. A matter that can interrupt the daily order of business is said to be privileged, just by way of definition. Right? In practice, the House never follows the daily order of business that Rule 14 defines. How would you like to know that? Well, you know it now, but you probably, I don't know whether you would have guessed it or not. You probably thought that since it happened the same way all the time, they were following the rules. But in fact, they are simply not following the rules the same way day after day. Instead, virtually all the legislative business that the House transacts on the floor each day, after the opening prayer and the approval of the journal, which is different from the congressional record, by the way. Did you know that? The congressional record is the full record of debates and everything that is said on the floor or entered into the record. The journal is more like minutes. This happened, that happened, we approved this bill, that bill, just bare bones stuff. You can find the contents of the journal printed in the congressional record, however, each day. Anyway, so there you go. Approval of the journal, Pledge of Allegiance, all of that, everything that comes after that is conducted either by unanimous consent, like the Senate, or as a privileged interruption in the daily order of business. That's kind of surprising, actually. Various rules of the House give privilege to specific kinds of measures and matters. Most important is Clause 5A of Rule 13. Everyone knows it because of how important it is, right? Which grants certain committees the, quote, leave to report at any time, unquote, on certain kinds of bills and resolutions. Those bills and resolutions are privileged under this rule. Privileged business includes, 1, it's not numbered, but they're bullet points. General appropriations bills reported by the Committee on Appropriations and continuing resolutions reported by the same committee after September 15th, like when it's late and you're running out of time and there's a government shutdown looming. Budget resolutions and reconciliation bills reported by the Committee on the Budget. Next up, also privileged, amendments to the House's rules and resolutions affecting the order of business, or special rules reported by the Committee on Rules, and resolutions concerning the official conduct of members and staff reported by the Committee on Ethics. So, 4 different categories, really 3 different categories. Well, no, I guess it is 4. Here's how this operates in normal business, right? Like you say, well, I don't know, how come they really honestly abandon the formal rules-bound order of business every single day? Yeah, sorta. I mean, they do. And really, so the exception becomes the rule. That's literally the definition of the exception becoming the rule. But you see what the third bullet point was? Amendments to the House rules and resolutions affecting the order of business, i.e. special rules, reported by the Committee on Rules. So that's what they're saying here is, well, sure, you may say, well, sure, changing the House rules seems like a privileged motion. Yes. But they don't actually change the House rules very often. They do it on the first day of a new Congress, adopt a new rules package. And then occasionally when they find like a really, intractable problem and they finally build enough momentum to change the rules in the middle of the session, yes, they will bring that to the floor. Obviously, very important, right? Yes, but they're actually, look at the second half of that. Resolutions affecting the order of business. Okay, the normal order of business is XYZ as defined in the rules. We don't want to do that today. In fact, we never want to do that. How do we get out of that as a routine matter? Resolutions affecting the order of business. And you might say, well, what does that? And then that's where the parenthetical inclusion, special rules, comes in. Oh, you mean the special rules that are so special that they consider like 5 of these a day? That is to say, the rule, lowercase r, governing how a bill will be debated, the routine business that precedes the consideration of every bill in the House. Yes, those special rules. Those are rules affecting the order of business. They tell you how you will be conducting business, despite what the capital R standing rules of the House say about what should come next. We've just adopted a special rule that says not that, but this, the consideration of this bill for this long with this many amendments in order. That's the role of things. But otherwise, yeah, you would have to do something completely different, but they just never do because this is much better. So, privilege in the House goes to appropriations bills. I was going to combine appropriations and budget resolutions and reconciliation into one category, the fiscal business of the House, but they are very different, and we take pains here to differentiate appropriations from the capital B budget, a very different document, versus what people consider lowercase b budget and budgetary issues, the budget itself, the appropriations, the authorizations that go into the appropriations process, reconciliation bills. You could be forgiven for considering that all to be one large category of the fiscal business, the purse strings, if you will, and that a different category than number 2, amending the House rules, actual standing rules, or special orders of business, like here comes a bill. We need to have a rule for its consideration. Category 2. And then the third/fourth category, the privilege stuff that they're dealing with today, expelling a member, censuring a member, etc., dealing with ethics issues. Now, there's other kinds. We haven't even gotten through page 1 here. Other kinds of legislative business derive their privilege from other House rules or from well-established precedents, such as the following. Resolutions making committee assignments, right? The what would be in the Senate, the organizing resolution up front. They have one of those in the House too, but 435 members come and go all the time from committees. So, okay, but those are important too. They can jump to the front of the line if there's nothing else going on in the morning. Questions of personal privilege or privileges of the House, different kind of privilege. If someone gets maligned on the House floor or is under indictment and they want to speak to it or something like that, some scandal breaks and they want to address it as point of personal privilege, that too can jump to the front of the line if it's recognized by the chair. And resolutions of inquiry, seeking documents or facts from the executive branch, something short of a subpoena. And of course, people like sometimes to go with the splashier subpoena route these days. But you're not supposed to arrive there until you've exhausted all other remedies like the resolution of inquiry. Among the privileged measures listed above, only general appropriations bills, continuing resolutions, and budget reconciliation bills are enacted into law. All of the others involve internal operations of the Congress or House, and that includes the budget, by the way. Privilege may also be based on the particular action contemplated or the stage of the legislative process, such as, more bulleted points, certain motions to send bills to conference also can get privilege. Conference reports, important, need privilege. Senate amendments to which the House has disagreed, and bills that the President has vetoed and returned to Congress. The House can consider any one of these privileged matters at any time that the House is not already, I would add, acting on something else. Not just supposed to be acting on it, but actually acting. In practice, though, the choice of the day and time for considering a privileged measure is made through discussions involving the majority party leadership and the committee chairman, usually in consultation with the committee's ranking minority member. Again, that's essentially describing the process by which you might come to the decision not to obey the 2-day rule, if that's of use to you, and just work it out with everybody. Let's not have any objections, and then we'll all get what we want. If everyone agrees, no point of order against it. You just proceed as you wish. In addition, some laws grant privilege to certain kinds of measures, particular kinds of measures, typically in the form of a joint resolution that Congress can pass, usually by using expedited procedures within a limited time period and usually for the purpose of disapproving some action that the president or an executive branch official plans to take or has taken. This kind of measure may be privileged even if the committee to which it was referred has not reported it. Sometimes the Congressional Review Act, business like that, might fall under that category. No other bills are privileged. Therefore, so if you wanted to bring a resolution about not funding Iranian terrorism and say it's privileged, no, not really. It isn't. Unless, of course, you adopt a special rule interrupting the normal order of business and ordering that it be considered immediately following its adoption or at some point following the adoption of that special rule. That's how it normally works. So no other bills are privileged. Therefore, the chairman of a committee cannot simply rise on the floor and call up for consideration some other kind of bill that his or her committee has reported, because House rules do not empower the chairman or any other member to interrupt the daily order of business for that purpose. You can scream about it all you want, but then the chair can say, well, you're not recognized for that purpose, so, F off. Instead, non-privileged bills are brought up on the floor in one of 3 ways: by unanimous consent, and as they remind you, the special rule itself is privileged, and that's how you can get something to the floor right away, right? You call up the rule because the rule is privileged. Why is it privileged? Because it is a request to depart from the normal order of business. And then if you consider the rule and adopt the rule itself orders you at some point to bring up for consideration the bill that it's written for, whether that's immediately following the adoption of the rule or within some certain time afterwards. That's just basically how you get things to the floor. So unanimous consent, the terms of a special rule, or by one of several special procedures that are privileged orders of business on certain days as provided under House Rule 15. Do you want to know about those? Well, we'll run through them after this break, but it's only going to take another minute or two to do that. Then we can move on to the rest of the business. Isn't this the weediness you wanted? Isn't this why you're listening to the show? If not, sorry. Hi, everybody. It's me, David Waldman. Yes, the same guy who interrupts you all the time. Interrupting you one more time just to tell you again, another reminder that your contributions are what keep this show on the air, and patreon.com, patreon.com, is still among the easiest ways to make the sustaining subscription donations that keep us afloat. Are you ready for the pep talk about how our Patreon campaign is still going strong and growing? Well, too bad. Yeah, the plain fact is we actually are headed in the wrong direction, and whereas we once had about 175 monthly patrons, we're now actually down below 150. Time to recruit some more. Not exactly the kind of news I wanted to share, but there it is. For those of you in a position to support the show, patreon.com does make it easy to make those secure, recurring monthly contributions to do so. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. We've been through a lot together. The worst of the pandemic, we hope. The worst of the insurrection, we hope. So go ahead and treat yourself. You don't need an excuse. Give yourself the gift of a little something you enjoy in life. Support the show. And of course, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running on those options too. So thanks again, everyone, for all your support. We couldn't, or at least shouldn't, do it without you. Hope you'll be on board soon too. Thanks for all your support. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. All right, I think we'll have to wrap up the privileged resolution discussion because the privilege is running out. But there is a third category of ways that you can get business to the floor besides unanimous consent and special rules. That's normal. You all knew about all of those things. You think of unanimous consent as a mechanism that gets used primarily in the Senate. It is primarily what gets used in the Senate. It's a fairly rare thing to get bills to the floor by unanimous consent in the House. They just don't bother typically, unless they have something either on an emergency basis that everyone actually does agree on or that's non-controversial or whatever. But usually it has to be negotiated by agreement first. Let's make sure that neither of our sides object. But now that you have murdery Trader Green types in the Republican conference, that's probably never going to come up because there's always somebody going to object. So they usually use rules to bring things to the floor, and that requires a majority vote. It's normal, and unanimous consent works anywhere. Anytime you have unanimous consent, who's going to argue? The answer is nobody. It's unanimous, this consent. So, it happens in the House occasionally, maybe, kind of, sort of. I don't even remember them moving bills this way. But if they did, it was because it was a non-controversial nothing bill. All right, let's see. So there's that, and there's rules, and then there's special orders of business on certain days as provided under House Rule 15. And I know we don't hear a lot about that. It's mostly arcane stuff, but I remember like the names of the categories, like they have something called Calendar Wednesday. And I never understood what the hell that actually was. But there are certain days of the week which under the standing rules of the House, which they almost never use because they just bypass it with special rules all the time. You used to have certain types of business were privileged for consideration on certain days of the week. And they just dispensed with that for the most part because special rules, everyone understands, well, sort of everyone understands them. They're pretty straightforward. And you just, look, if we're debating and voting on whether or not we're going to proceed with this bill, then it's pretty well understood that we're going to proceed with that bill afterwards at some point, whether immediately or not. But then you never have to learn the intricacies of the calendar Wednesday garbage and what's allowed on certain days of the week. What an interesting idea. And originally organizing the house, that I'm sure it made some sense at the time. Well, on Tuesdays we'll do this, and on Wednesdays we'll do that, and on Thursdays we'll do this kind of bill. Unless it's inconvenient, and then it became inconvenient, and they said, to hell with it. Rather than changing the rules and getting rid of things, like, why wouldn't you just do that, right? Screw this, let's get rid of Calendar Wednesday. Well, hang on a second. Be careful, because at one point, allegedly, apocryphally, we learned back in 1805 or something, right, in revising the rules of the Senate, you know what? The Senate works pretty well on unanimous consent. They love to do these things. It's a small group of people, especially back in 1805. They just work out their deals among themselves about how they're going to proceed. So we don't need this previous question motion. We've learned plenty about the previous question motion in the House, right? But we've also seen what kind of annoyances and troubles that it can cause. Well, imagine then if you had a previous question rule in the Senate, as they once did, although historians debate whether or not it actually operated the way it does today in the House. And it's understandable how much things may change over time. But they did have a previous question motion in the Senate, which was there to be used, presumably, to cut off debate if debate was becoming dilatory or useless. However, with a small group of senators arranging everything more or less by unanimous consent, once they had hammered out all the details of something, it fell into disuse. And Aaron Burr, it is said, during his vice presidency, helped revise Senate rules and evaluate their utility and found, hey, here's this privileged or previous question motion never gets used in the Senate. Not because it's useless, but because we haven't needed it while there was only, 35, 40 of us in the Senate, and we can work everything out under unanimous consent agreements instead. So let's get rid of it. And then it is said that it was eliminated that way, and then somebody realized at some point when they finally got around to actually inventing that thing that became known as the filibuster, realizing there was no rule in the Senate that allowed senators to get together and say, this has gone on for too long. One guy doesn't even have anything to add to the debate. He's just pretending to debate at this point so that we don't vote on this thing. Surely there's a fail-safe for this. And it is said that, oops, we got rid of that in the 1805 revisions. There are different versions of that in the scholarly writing. But just in case you are, jumping at the chance, let's get rid of Calendar Wednesday. It's stupid. No one uses it. Just chuck it. Sometimes there are unintended consequences, especially when other rules have been built as workarounds and they are built around this awkwardness. And then when you get rid of the awkwardness, the rule that's remaining no longer makes any sense. That happens a lot with filibuster reform, again, on the other side in the Senate, right? Where, well, why don't we get rid of X, Y, Z? Well, get rid of the filibuster. Where is it? It's not in here anywhere. It's just the absence of a rule that says you have to stop talking at some point, or that we can make you stop talking. Or you change the rules such that a simple majority can cut off debate under certain circumstances or for certain things under consideration, like executive nominations. Okay, well, you've done that, and that's good news, and it gets us moving forward. The problem is all you've done is change the threshold for invoking cloture, and you haven't done anything about the underlying cloture rules, which say that even post-cloture, there's an additional 30 hours of debate in case you want to make some amendments. Even if it's an executive appointment where there's no amendments can be made, we still have 30 hours of post-cloture time. Easier to get to cloture, but no one's done anything about the post-cloture time that's in the rules. It's just a remnant of a previous rule that we amended without getting rid of the appendages. All right. Anyway, I said this was only going to take a minute. We screwed that up pretty good. So what was that third way of getting things to the floor in the House? This weird calendar stuff. These procedures involve 1, motions to suspend the rules, usually handled on Tuesdays in the House. 2, motions to discharge committees from further consideration of bills referred to them. They assign that to a day of the week. Number 3, consideration of the District of Columbia business. And 4, there's more, 4, the call of the private calendar for considering private bills, not often used or discussed these days anymore, but a whole different interesting category that you could read a CRS report about. What is the private calendar? What are private bills? Just what they sound like, granting special relief of some kind to private, singular individuals in the country. There are such bills. And 5, the call of the committees on Calendar Wednesday. There it is, when committees can call up non-privileged bills that they have reported, right? Like if you thought, hey, that is awkward that the chairman of a committee, powerful position, that's actually reported out a bill that's now waiting to be considered on the House floor, and for some reason isn't being considered on the House floor yet. Why can't the committee chairman stand up and say, hey, we're done with this. It's kind of important. We worked on it pretty hard. We'd like to see it considered. Let's bring it up. You can't do that. Oh, but why? I'm a powerful guy. Well, I'll tell you what. There's a lot of powerful guys around here. We just think it's best if this stuff be handled by the leadership and the speaker and the majority leader. One central clearinghouse for determining what's going to come to the floor. Because otherwise it's chaos. There's 435 of us here. We all have different ideas about what's most important and most privileged. And if we could all just stand up and say, hey, I want the no funding for Iranian terrorism bill today. Well, we don't. How are we going to handle that? How are we going to acknowledge the power of committee chairs to have some say in, look, we have a pretty good idea of what's important. After all, we prioritized what to mark up and report out in our committee, right? There's a lot of junk that we don't take up. This is important. Well, okay, fine. I'll tell you what. How about if every Wednesday of every week, Wednesday is the day when you jerks can say, I have something important too, all right? And we'll consider it. If the House agrees with you, fine, we'll do it. Calendar Wednesday. When non-privileged bills by unanimous consent can be brought up or pursuant to special rules or under motions to suspend the rules. The alternative procedures, of course, are used infrequently. Why? Because they like to centralize control there. And you can assuage most committee chairs. Well, I'm going to do it by Calendar Wednesday. Well, I'll tell you what. I know you're privileged in being allowed to do so. Why don't we not do it? But I'll tell you what we'll do. I want to bring this up on a Thursday. I just think it's better. Works for us better on Thursday. So we'll agree to Thursday if you'll agree not to invoke your right to bring it up on Calendar Wednesday. We just have too many things to do. But we guarantee you we will get to it Thursday. Or we're going to get to it next Tuesday. We'll put it on a schedule. All right. If it's scheduled, that's all I really cared about. So why bother with Calendar Wednesday? Well, you don't. You just make an arrangement otherwise. But why not eliminate Calendar Wednesday? Because then committee chairs lose their leverage to say, well, if you don't schedule it for me at a date certain, then I'm going to do it on a Calendar Wednesday. Fine. We'll give you what you want. So that's why you don't eliminate Calendar Wednesday, even though nobody uses it, right? Why? What is let's analogize to this, the hold in the Senate. Right? Why don't we get rid of the secret hold? Well, we can't because, well, we can get rid of the secret part of it. Why not get rid of holds? They're stupid. Why should one senator be allowed to Well, it isn't one senator. It's the other senator saying, I don't like it, but I'll recognize it because it can create problems if we don't, right? If we don't honor your hold, that is at least, based in some reality. And I'm making a demand of the Department of Justice, and they have to comply with this thing, but they seem likely to eventually comply with it. Fine, we'll honor your hold until it gets done. If it's garbage and it's a hold on every military advancement, well, then we'll look for ways to work around it. But why not get rid of the hold? Because it's not in the rules. It doesn't exist anywhere. There's nothing to get rid of. It's the rest of the Senate agreeing, as much of a pain in the ass as it is, let's wait until so-and-so gets the thing that they demand because reasons. There's nothing to get rid of. And Calendar Wednesday you could get rid of, but, chairmen want it because they're able to say, well, if you don't at least give me a date certain, I'll invoke this thing. So fine. Now you know why we haven't gotten rid of Calendar Wednesday. Plus the other problems that it can cause from the Aaron Burr story. Wow. Okay. Now, at this point, I promised you Greg Sargent, and Greg Sargent you will get. Why? What's it about? It's about Ukraine. Remember them? They're having a war. How Trump, remember him? He's trying to come back, is wrecking hopes for a, quote, reasonable Ukraine deal. The quote is just about reasonable. It's definitely happening in Ukraine, not just, quote, Ukraine. Senator Tom Tillis. Remember him? He's the other TT senator, besides Tommy Tuberville. Well, Tom Tillis wants you to know that he's very, quote, reasonable. That's the word the North Carolina Republican used with reporters this week while describing immigration reforms that the GOP is demanding from Senate Democrats in exchange for supporting the billions in Ukraine aid that President Biden wants. Because now helping people resist Russian invasion is a partisan issue. But the demands, I added that part. That's not Greg, but Greg would likely agree with you on that one, me on that one. But the demands from Tillis and his fellow Republicans leading the talks, Senator James Lankford of Oklahoma, for instance, are not reasonable at all. They're following Donald Trump's playbook. Under the guise of seeking more, quote, border security, they're insisting on provisions that would reduce legal immigration in numerous ways that could even undermine the goal of securing the border. That seems nonsensical. So leave it to Republicans to demand it. Let's see. According to Democratic sources familiar with the negotiations, Republican demands began to shift soon after the New York Times reported that in a second Trump term, he would launch mass removals of millions of undocumented immigrants, gut asylum seeking almost entirely, and dramatically expand migrant detention in, quote, giant camps. As one Senate Democratic source told me, Republicans started acting as though Trump and his immigration policy advisor, Stephen Miller, were looking over their shoulders. Biden has asked Congress to provide tens of billions of dollars in aid to Ukraine and Israel, and an additional $14 billion to buttress the southern border, and a sop to them, right? With new law enforcement agents, expanded detention, not great, and other increased security measures. In other words, though, Biden is saying, well, all right, border security doesn't really even belong in this bill. It's about aid, foreign aid, Ukraine and Israel. Well, we're not going to give it to you unless you do something about the border. Fine, we'll do something about the border. All right. And then, of course, they won't take yes for an answer. Well, we want more. We want worse things than you're willing to offer. But Republicans, as we find out in Greg's write-up, won't agree to that latter request or to the Ukraine aid without substantial changes to immigration policy as well. This week, Tillis told reporters that without language on parole, that's a quote, any compromise would not constitute, quote, border security. I mean, you see what's happened here? We want something about border security. All right, how about increased funding for border security agents? And what else did they offer? Expanded detention and other increased security measures. And Tillis says, well, I guess reporters, basically this is how it happens. Reporters say, so Tillis, what do you say? You guys demanded more border security, and Biden offered more funding for security officers, more detention capacity, and other undefined security measures, or at least ones that are not defined in this write-up about it. And Tillis says, well, no, we won't take that. Well, why not? You asked for more border security, and he offered it. Well, our definition of border security is different. That unless there's language on parole, that's not border security. Well, why not? Like most people think, well, we want more border security. All right, here's more guards and more capacity to hold people in detention. That's more border security. Well, no, it isn't. I mean, okay, wrong, but what do you mean? Well, without having this language on parole, it doesn't matter because we're not going to go along with this bill, and so therefore no more aid to Ukraine. All right, what's going on here? That, Greg tells us, is a reference to Biden's use of parole authority for humanitarian purposes to allow 30,000 people from Cuba, Haiti, Nicaragua, and Venezuela to gain entry to the United States each month. Remember, fleeing communism / other disasters like in Haiti, but they're special. They're fleeing communism. America welcomes that, or Republicans used to want that as an exception. Fleeing communism, we can hold you up as an example to the world. We can hold ourselves up as an example to the world for accepting you. But that's off the table now because they're tired of it, and most of those people are brown anyway. I guess that's what. Anyway, according to Democratic sources, Republicans are demanding that presidential parole authority be scaled back so it can be applied only on an individual case-by-case basis and not to large groups from a single nationality. This way, Republicans can say, for instance, well, we'll continue it with the Cubans because when they get here to this country and become naturalized, they tend to vote Republican. Those guys get in, and the people who come to this country who we think tend to vote Democratic once naturalized, no, they're not allowed in. That would functionally gut those programs entirely, which is an absurd demand. Under those parole grants, if migrants gain U.S. sponsors and pass background checks, they can live and work in the country for 2 years. It doesn't even have anything to do with voting yet, right? This provides an orderly alternative to the mode of entry that enrages Republicans, in which migrants breach the border, seek asylum, and then disappear into the country while awaiting a hearing. Gutting parole could mean more of the latter, right? If you don't have the parole thing, even though that allows large numbers of people in, it allows them in under controlled circumstances. And if you don't have that, then you just have pressure building up in the system and people saying, to hell with it, we're going to cross the border however we can. Canceling parole would significantly heighten the pressures on the border and the numbers of migrants crossing, said Doris Meisner, a senior fellow at the Migration Policy Institute. It's the opposite of what's needed to strengthen border security. In another absurdity, Republicans have said publicly that Democrats must agree to reduce illegal border crossings by more than 50%. But that's a fuzzy demand. It's unclear how policy changes could dramatically slash the number who attempt to enter and simply get intercepted by law enforcement. How do you do that exactly, right? We want a rule that says you're going to dramatically reduce the number of people who don't even bother obeying the rules. I'm not certain how you get there. But it's an impossible, demand. And so therefore, what do you know? Demands, the Democrats are always going to be in breach of that one. And we get to, put them over a barrel over it forever because there's no way you can comply. When Democratic staffers sought clarification on this point because they wanted to be studious about it, right? The sources say they got nothing back because there isn't anything. There's nothing you can tell people. That was just a trap offer. Republicans would also raise the legal standard to qualify for asylum, and here the situation gets particularly frustrating. One can envision a compromise that provides changes to the asylum standard in exchange for, say, legalizing dreamers who were brought here illegally as children. But Republicans have ruled out making any such concessions. Spokespeople for Tillis and Langford didn't respond to any requests for comment. What's really bizarre about this impasse is that Republicans should support, I can't believe they're being hypocritical, they should support much of what Biden's initial request for border security funding contained. After all, it would also fund expedited asylum processing, which could reduce the window for migrants to exploit the system and prompt faster removals for those who don't qualify. Aren't those things Republicans want? Sure they are, but they also don't want to see a deal made because then they don't have their crisis. To his credit, Tillis did compromise on the issue last year when he and Senator Kyrsten Sinema negotiated reforms that ultimately died in Congress. And Democrats say, so credit for what? Trying hard. And Democrats say Langford, who has acknowledged the need for both sides to compromise, is acting mostly in good faith, but Trump's seemingly unshakable influence over the GOP stands to reshape these ongoing negotiations. Trump's loud broadcasting of plans for an extraordinarily cruel immigration crackdown, if he's elected president again, or however he takes power, appears to be rendering Republicans even less open to compromise without him being in the room. Hence their slapdash demand for cuts to legal immigration and other radical measures, which seems to cast doubt which seems to cast about for some way to satiate the former president's taste for draconian nativist savagery. The bottom line, Senate Republicans are demanding that Democrats add numerous extreme concessions to a package that already gives Republicans many border security measures they ordinarily support in exchange for Ukraine aid that many already back anyway. Tillis and Lankford can either be reasonable in these negotiations or they can satisfy Trump and Miller, but they can't do both. Unfortunately, they appear to be privileging, again, the latter. So a little bit of Antonin Scalia's seat being kept open and Tuberville blocking all the military advancements in the hopes that, well, one day Donald Trump will be president and he gets to handle all these things, right? We'll have no answer on immigration, and then instead of the reasonable back and forth, which isn't even all that reasonable, between Democrats and Republicans on how to decide these things, we'll just let the fascist dictator decide these things instead. Although, I mean, I guess maybe you could think Tillis and Lankford do seem to understand that if they want Congress to have any hand in setting this policy, as opposed to it just being handed down from the fascist dictator president, this is your last chance to actually pass that policy. But on the other hand, they might also be recognizing, what's the difference of what we write into law if we're going to all give in to a fascist dictator in a year? The laws will all be rewritten anyway. But yeah, in the meantime, that is affecting the negotiations. Why come to a reasonable compromise when we can hold out and say, well, maybe we could win more in these negotiations, even if we really do think Congress should handle this thing. We could win more concessions from the Democrats by saying, well, the alternative is we just do nothing and we delay everything and nothing gets passed, and then Trump gets elected / otherwise takes power, and it's the ultimate nativist fantasy gone wild with no boundaries and no strictures of law whatsoever. So if you don't want that, let's put this into place. What is this? Well, last week it was a reasonable compromise, but this time we're going to have to say, well, if you don't want the fascist dictator's personal fantasy to be policy, then I guess give us some more stuff, like maybe free pizza for all Republicans. I mean, we've run out of things to ask for. There's no more draconian policy we could possibly ask for besides what we're going to get anyway under Trump. So in the meantime, give us some other crap. And it's not even serious. So interesting. That's the dynamic there. And that was a good article to expand off of. But thankful to Greg for laying that one out there. Okay. We only have a minute or two left. Don't know if we're going to be able to get to the rest of the stuff. Although I want to acknowledge, well, we got Friday to handle some of these other things here. Anything else we can sneak in? Yes, probably. I guess since we're on the topic of migration, we'll throw this one in there. Has nothing to do with American migration, unless it does. But here's the story from the CBC, our friends in Canada, covering what's happening on the border between Russia and Finland. Not raking the forests, but something completely different. But we've heard this story before from out of Poland and now up in Finland. Finland closing its border with Russia. Always a good idea, typically, unless this is happening. It's happening amid alleged hybrid attack using migrants. What's happening? Subheader tells us that crossings are to be shut for at least 2 weeks following a surge of migrants trying to enter from Russia. Nick Logan reporting for CBC News. Here's the situation. Finland, as we said, temporarily closing down its 1,340-kilometer long eastern border with Russia after seeing an abnormally large number of migrants arrive this month, a situation its prime minister describes as a hybrid attack orchestrated by Moscow. Are a bunch of Russians trying to infiltrate Finland? Some, but no. It's mostly actually relocated migrants from third countries, fourth, fifth, and sixth countries as well. Finnish officials have accused Russia of guiding third country migrants to its border crossings to manufacture a crisis, a possible retaliation for joining NATO earlier this year. We don't accept any attempts to undermine our national security, our prime minister in question here, except he's Finnish, so who knows how he says his name. Petteri Orpo, maybe, kind of. Anyway, where are these migrants from? Apparently, mostly Middle Eastern and Central Asia. Syria, Iraq, Afghanistan, Yemen, and Somalia. How do they get to Russia? I don't know. What is Russia doing with them? Essentially, they're doing with these migrants what Ron DeSantis and, what's his name? Greg Abbott are doing in Texas and Florida. They're putting them on buses, planes, what have you, and shipping them to places where they'll cause problems for other people, whether that's Martha's Vineyard, New York City, Washington, D.C., etc., etc. What do you know? Greg Abbott and Ron DeSantis have the same policy that Vladimir Putin has. What a crazy, strange thing. A weird way to have political union with Russia to own the globalists once again. And they're moving these Middle Eastern and Central Asian migrants up to the northernmost border crossing between Russia and Finland, the natural place for folks from warmer climes to end up. And the Finnish wanting to do the right thing and not leave these people in the lurch and starving in the frozen tundra of the north. The Russians don't care what happens to them. The Finnish do have a soft spot for them, but they don't have the capacity to absorb them all. And if they do, Russians will just keep working to overwhelm that capacity so that the newest NATO ally is weakened, national security, fiscally, and otherwise. Fiendish plot. And, of course, one of which Republican governors in the United States of America are only too happy to cooperate in their own fashion. How odd. Anyway, time now to hand things over to Justice Putnam for the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
From you have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
Here's what's on his radar today. Trump's prison fears mount as Jack Smith wins another round in the coup subpoena clash. On the rest of the menu, the New York court-ordered financial auditor caught Trump sneaking $40 million from the Trump Organization into a personal bank account. Love to hear about that one. You love to hear it. You have to hate to have it happen. See you tomorrow.